Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinells. Did I get that out right? Spooky Ass Shit. That's what I meant to say. I think I kind of lost it on the last word there. Anyway, this is Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinells. And tonight, we're going back for a good old ghost story. I was looking at the past episodes, and we have not done a nice old-fashioned ghost story in a really long time. So, this is it. We're getting right back to it. Before we dive in, I'd like to remind you to check out the website, spookyasshit.com or spookyas.com. They both take you to the same place, and that is the show's blog page. From there, you can listen to each and every episode, even the ones that are no longer available on iTunes. We lose one each time I post a new one now, so you got to dive back into the archives to hear every episode. How else will you know our thoughts on Shadow People or Johnstone's Inn, Haunted Inn right in my own hometown? So you can check out those episodes there. You can also find sometimes outtakes and YouTube videos and stuff that go along with each episode. You can also find links to our social media. We are at Spooky Ass Shit on Instagram and Twitter. And you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. I also want to remind you to please share the show with your friends. That's the way we grow the Spookaroo army. And we need more and more to keep the show going strong. So please, if you know anyone who's even just a little bit interested in the supernatural, in mysteries, in true crime, in old Halloween specials, we cover all that stuff and more. So please, fill them in on this show. All right, I've got no guests this week. I've got nothing to plug. Nothing really exciting has happened since the last time we talked, so we're going to get right into it. And tonight, we're talking about what is known as Chicago's most famous ghosts, Resurrection Mary. Now, I was reminded of this story. I've heard it many times, but probably the first time I ever heard it, and what reminded me of it most recently is Unsolved Mysteries. I was watching Season 6 recently on Amazon, and in one episode, I forget which number, but Season 6 anyway, they talk about Resurrection Mary, and I was like, oh, that would be a good story to cover if I can find enough information on it. And I have, so here we are. In 1939, Jerry Paulus stopped into a Chicago dance hall, the Liberty Grove at 47th and Mozart, where he was a regular. Jerry noticed a young blonde woman in a rather formal white gown. He had never seen this young woman before, but he decided to ask her to dance. To his delight, the young woman said yes. He tried to make small talk as they danced, but he found his partner to be a rather quiet girl. When she did respond to him, she responded with yes or no answers. He was able to learn that her name was Mary, and that she lived at an address on the south side of town. He danced with a young woman all night, and Jerry noticed that there was something kind of strange about her hands. They were cold as ice. He put it out of mind, remembering the old saying, cold hands means a warm heart. When it was time to leave, Jerry offered Mary a ride home. Even in 1939, these old dogs trying to get their time in. As they walked to the car, Mary turned to Jerry and said, "You might as well drop me off at Archer Road." Jerry was confused because Archer Road was not near the address that Mary had given him earlier as her residence. When Jerry questioned her on this, Mary cut him off mid-sentence, saying, "Please, I want to go to Archer Road." Jerry did as Mary asked, and as they drove down Archer Road, they began to pass Resurrection Cemetery. "Stop here," said Mary. Jerry stopped, and without another word, Mary got out of the car. Jerry watched her walk away, and as she did, he thought it looked like she vanished into thin air. Jerry was mystified, but not believing his eyes, he blamed the strange disappearance on a trick of the shadows in the night. He thought it was highly unusual that Mary wanted to be dropped off at a lonely cemetery late at night, but he figured she must have been fighting with her parents or having some other kind of home issues. Still, she had placed a mystery into his lap, and Jerry wanted to know more. Actually, in the episode of Unsolved Mysteries, he just basically is like, oh, that was really weird. And then they're like, but he was willing to forgive one mysterious disappearance. What? It's not like she just disappeared. I gave him more of an explanation than they actually gave on the show just now. That like, oh, maybe it was a trick of the light. They didn't say that on the show. He was just like, oh, that was weird, but still, I'm going to try to hit it. Oh, boy. The next day, Jerry drove to the house where Mary had said she lived. An older woman answered the door. When Jerry explained that he had met a young woman named Mary at a dance last night and that he was hoping to see her again, the woman told him that she did have a daughter named Mary, but she had been dead for 5 years. The story goes that on the last evening of her life, Mary had spent the night dancing with a boyfriend at the O. Henry Ballroom. At some point, they got into an argument, and Mary stormed out. Even though it was a cold winter's night, she thought she would rather face the cold walk home than spend one more minute in the company of her no-good boyfriend. She left the ballroom and started walking up Archer Avenue. She had not gotten very far when she was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver who fled the scene, leaving Mary to die. Her parents found her and were grief-stricken at the sight of her dead body. They buried her in Resurrection Cemetery, wearing a beautiful white dancing dress and matching shoes. The hit-and-run driver was never found. Jerry was stunned by the news that he had apparently spent the night dancing with a dead woman. But then her cold hands suddenly sprang to his mind. He knew that he had felt that cold touch before. You see, Jerry had worked in a mortuary for a time, and he knew where he had felt that icy touch before. It was the cold touch of a corpse. Years later, Chicago historian Richard Crowe hypothesized that the ghost was the restless spirit of a young woman named Mary Bregorvy. Mary Bregorvy had been killed in a traffic accident in 1934, a month before her 21st birthday. She was laid to rest in Resurrection Cemetery in her favorite white gown. Now, of course, the fact that she's buried in Resurrection Cemetery, she died in the correct year, and she was buried wearing the correct clothing. All those match the legend of Resurrection Mary, but the rest of the details don't really match what happened. She wasn't leaving the correct dance club, and there's a couple other discrepancies, but anyway, that's the best guess so far, although there is another suspect as to who Resurrection Mary could have been in life. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Over the years, the mysterious apparition was seen time and time again. She became known by locals as Resurrection Mary. She has been seen at dance clubs, in taxis, and walking outside the cemetery looking for someone to take her home. She also reportedly burned her handprints onto the wrought iron fence around the cemetery in August of 1976, although officials at the cemetery have stated that actually what happened was a truck backed into it and damaged the fence, so it's not really evidence of a ghost, but still, kind of fun. In a January 31st, 1979 article in the Suburban Trib, columnist Bill Geist detailed the story of a cab driver named Ralph who picked up a young woman, a looker, a blonde. She was young enough to be my daughter. 21 tops. I know a Chicago cabbie might not sound like that, but that's just my cabbie voice. Near a small shopping center on Archer Avenue. A couple of miles up there on Archer, she jumped with a start like a horse and said, "Here, here." I hit the brakes. I looked around, and I didn't see no kind of house. "Where?" I said. And then she sticks out her arm and points across the road to my left and says, "There." And that's when it happened. I looked to my left, like this, at this little shack. And when I turned, she was gone. Vanished. And the car door never opened. May the good Lord strike me dead. It never opened. In 1980, a woman named Claire Rudnicki was driving along the front of Resurrection Cemetery when she claimed to have had a run-in with Mary. I really didn't think there was any ghost. You hear those stories and those old ghost tales, but it's never happened to me. But now, I must say, I think I'm changing my mind. I was just looking out the window as we were going down the street, and on the right-hand side of the road, there was this girl walking. She was bright, very bright, like illuminating. She was just walking very slowly. I remember thinking, oh my God, it's Resurrection Mary, and I can feel my stomach starting to turn. I was very frightened, I have to admit it. It did scare me. Claire's husband, Mark Rudnicki, was also in the car and backs up his wife's claim, saying, "We were well past it. Turned around and came back, and by the time we'd gotten to where we'd originally seen her, it had gone. Vanished." They also state in that in Unsolved Mysteries, they interview that couple, actually. And the husband also, he kind of yes ends. Remember we talked about improv in cold readings and that kind of stuff? It kind of works for ghost stories too, because yes, he's backing her up. Yeah, we saw the ghost end, and what he adds to the story is that when they passed by her the first time, she looked normal from behind and the side and everything, but when he was trying to look at her face, there were no features. It was just a black void, and it's actually kind of creepy looking on the show because she's clearly wearing like something, or they digitally did something to her face to kind of black out her face, but she's got the blonde hair, she's got the glowing white dress, and they kind of blacked it out. Now, the husband was very excited and hopes to see her again. The wife mentioned that she never wants to see her again. All right, back to our tale. In October of 1989, Janet Kalau and a friend were out for an evening drive, and they found themselves passing Resurrection Cemetery. It was then Janet recalled that a pale young woman ran out in front of her car. There was no impact. There was no bump to say, that we had hit something. But I know she ran out, and I hit her. She was all in white, and her hair and her dress were flowing back. It was like a stream backwards, It was away from her. And I just saw this profile of a young woman. Another strange encounter took place in the summer of 1996 at a place called Chet's Melody Lounge, a small bar located just across the street from Resurrection Cemetery. The bar's owner, Chet Perinsky, was just getting ready to leave the bar at around 4 a.m. when suddenly a man came running in, screaming that he needed to use the phone. He said it was an emergency, that he had just run over a girl on Archer Road, but when he got out to check on her, he couldn't find her body. Now, old Chet had heard similar stories many times before. Being that his bar was located so close to Resurrection Cemetery, it was often the first place that people stopped to share their stories of run-ins with Resurrection Mary. Chet was about to tell the man to beat it when a truck driver pulled up saying he had seen the accident and also wondered where the injured girl could have gone. He said that he saw the girl get hit, but didn't see the girl in the street. She seemed to have just vanished, like a ghost. The police were called, but, to the shock of none of us, they found no injured girl or any signs that any accident had taken place at all. Sightings of Resurrection Mary seem to have quieted down since then, but with the internet and podcasts like this spreading the legend of Resurrection Mary, I'm sure new sightings will begin to be reported and further elaborations will ensue. As I stated earlier, for a long time the real Mary was thought to be Mary Bregovi. After all, her name is Mary. She was 21 when she passed away, which is the age that most witnesses guess Resurrection Mary appears to be. And she did die in an auto accident, and in a year that fits Jerry Paulus's story. And she is buried in Resurrection Cemetery. But there is also reason to believe that this Mary might not be the Mary. Most notably, Resurrection Mary is always noted as having very light blonde hair. Mary Bregovi had very dark hair. You can see a picture of her on spookyas.com. In more recent times, another girl buried at Resurrection Cemetery also has become a popular candidate for the true identity of Resurrection Mary. Her name was Anna Norkus. Her name's not Mary, her name's Anna Norkus. All right. Anyway, as the story goes, she was so devoted to the Virgin Mother that she demanded to be called by her chosen Christian name, Mary. Oh, there we go. There are some things about her that fit the resurrection myth better than Mary Begorvey. First of all, she was blonde. Second, she was killed in an auto accident after coming home from the O. Henry Ballroom, which is the very same ballroom that Resurrection Mary was said to be leaving when she was hit by a car. What doesn't fit the Resurrection Mary story is that she passed away in 1927, which is several years too early to fit the Mary and Jerry Paulus' story. But, more importantly, Anna was only 12 years old. If she is Resurrection Mary, that adds a whole new level of creepiness, considering that all the male witnesses comment on how hot she was. Gross. The ballroom that figures into the story, the O. Henry, was eventually renamed the Willowbrook, and until very recently, you could have visited it in the hopes of dancing with Mary yourself. Unfortunately, on October 28, 2016, the Willowbrook Ballroom was destroyed by a massive fire. Of course, Resurrection Mary has been spotted at various places near the cemetery, so there's still hope. But the real question is Resurrection Mary a real, true ghost story, or is this just an example of an urban myth? You see, the urban myth known as the vanishing hitchhiker is nothing new. It's been around about as long as automobiles have. In fact, it might even exist before that, in horse and buggy days, and even just horse days before that. It's not special to Chicago either. There are many, many so-called vanishing hitchhikers all over the world. I was reading a little bit about some. Most of the stories, they're not really that interesting. They all kind of play along the lines of the basic myth, which I'm going to explain in a second, but not too dissimilar from stories about Resurrection Mary. We have one about a sort of demonic red-headed hitchhiker here in Massachusetts, and there's also the Lady in White in Switzerland, I believe, and many other examples throughout the world. So the basic version of the vanishing hitchhiker myth goes like this. The vanishing hitchhiker asks for a ride. The driver stops and gives them a ride. The hitchhiker, most of the time, will get out of the car just as a normal passenger would, but they'll leave something behind. Maybe it's a purse, maybe it's a scarf, maybe it's a hat, but something that will cause the driver to seek the missing person, the vanishing hitchhiker, out. That later that day or the next day, and only then do they find out that this person is dead, and it's most likely the anniversary of their death on the day that they gave them the ride. Sometimes that story is kind of reversed, and the vanishing hitchhiker, if it's a lovely young woman and it's a male cabbie or just driver that stopped to pick them up, she'll say, "Oh, it's so cold out. I wish I wasn't so cold." And then the driver will say, "Well, here, you can borrow my jacket." And then the passenger will just leave the car, very suddenly after that, and the person will follow them, and what they find is their jacket is now draped over a tombstone with that date as the date of death for the person buried underneath. Sometimes the driver will make contact with a family member somehow, like, maybe the vanishing hitchhiker left behind their purse and their identifications in it, and they go to return it. And, of course, the family member, just like in the story of Resurrection Mary, says, "Well, yes, I do have a daughter or a sister or whatever, but she was killed in an auto accident several years ago." So, the Resurrection Mary story is probably the most famous example in the United States anyway of a vanishing hitchhiker, but it is something that has existed in modern folklore and mythology for quite some time. So that kind of tips the scales to thinking, well, maybe this is not quite an accurate story, that this is maybe not quite a real deal ghost. It's people seeing things, it's people wanting to see things. But don't take my word for it. Paranormal researcher Michael Goss, in his book, The Evidence for Phantom Hitchhikers, discovered that many reports of vanishing hitchhikers turn out to be based on folklore and hearsay stories. I saw something, or my brother said he saw something, Once upon a time, I think my mom said she might have seen, my aunt said once, so those kinds of stories that are passed down that way. According to Goss, most of the stories are, quote, fabricated folklore creations retold in new settings. So again, end quote. So again, old mythology retold as a new, charming little ghost story. Skeptic Joe Nickel, who investigated 2 alleged cases, concluded that there is no reliable evidence for vanishing hitchhikers. Historical examples have their origin in folklore tales and modern urban legends. Modern cases often involve conflicting accounts that may well be the result of exaggeration or hoaxing. I think in my younger days that's something, if I was a woman, that I could have seen myself trying to pull off if I lived in the Chicagoland area, a nice Resurrection Mary hoax. Yeah, I could see myself going out there and getting, kind of dousing a dress in some kind of bioluminescent material, something that would shine when a car's head beams hit me. It's also very dangerous, though. I don't recommend it because that you really could end up getting hit by a car, and you could become a real deal Resurrection Mary. So I don't advise you to do it. I'm just saying, me being the ghost lover that I am, even though I don't actually really believe in ghosts, but love ghost stories, I could see myself going out there and trying to add to the mythology in my younger days. I'm not really like that anymore. Now I'm more mellow. I just sit here and talk to you guys about them. So that's the story of Resurrection Mary. That's it in a nutshell. So, guys, what do you think? Is this a true, real deal ghost story? Can all these people be wrong about what they're seeing or making it up or seeing some kind of hoax? And what do you think about vanishing hitchhikers in general? And do you have any in your area? A while ago on Facebook, I sent out a little message saying, hey, I talk a lot about things that are local to my neck of the woods, the Northeast United States, and I talk about things that happen a lot in the United States in general, but I'd like to talk about ghost stories from other lands, because I bet there's some famous ghost stories that I've never heard of just because, I'm not from the Czech Republic or something like that. So, if you're listening to this and you're in a foreign country to the United States, please write in and let me know what famous ghost stories you have. And it doesn't have to be ghost stories. It could be monsters. It could be alien sightings or something like that. Just something famous and unusual. Or if you've got like a really, strange unsolved murder or something like that. I'd like to hear about all that stuff and be able to... You don't have to know everything about it. Just point me in the direction. I'll do the research. I'll figure it out. If it's worth doing a show about, then I'll get on it, and I will give you full credit, of course. Of course, you can write to me at the email, which is spookyasshit@gmail.com. That is ass, A-S-S, by the way, not A-S, not as. It's spookyasshit. I did name the show before, as fuck was kind of a thing, which has really kind of already died out already. But if that had been around, I probably would have named it that. Although, as I've said before, putting 2 curse words right in the title was kind of a mistake. But it's one I can't go back on now because iTunes doesn't allow you to have curse words in the title. That's why it was a mistake. But if you're thinking of starting a podcast, give it a nice clean title is my number 1 recommendation that can be seen anywhere, advertised anywhere. Don't be like me. Don't follow my example. I'm doing this all wrong. The fact that you're listening right now is a minor miracle. So I appreciate that. And again, encourage your friends to listen. Really encourage anyone. Go ahead. Share the show. If you're on Facebook, on the Facebook group, I always post a link to every new episode. So please, you can share that. You can share from the show's webpage. You can share all over the place. So please, if you could do that for me, that would be wonderful and much appreciated. And of course, don't forget to leave some kind words on the iTunes reviews or on Stitcher. I know you can review on Stitcher. I'm not sure about iHeartRadio or other listening platforms. YouTube, if anyone's watching this audio podcast on YouTube, it is available. It goes out automatically when I submit it. So it's possible you're listening from there. Go ahead and leave some kind words there. And again, so show suggestions or anything like that, comments, critiques, anything like that, you can email those to me. Check out the website, spookyas.com. that will take you to the show's blog page. You can listen to every episode, see some pictures from this episode. I've got pictures of both the alleged real Resurrection Marys, as well as some pictures of the cemetery itself and some other funky things. And of course, you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. I'll be back with a guest next week. And until then, be careful about who you give rides to. And don't be afraid.